Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Bob Mendelsohn, and this is Season 7, and it's Episode 3 of the Bob's Your Uncle podcast, broadcasting from here in Sydney, Australia. We think you'll like this particular episode. I interview Rachel Links Kushner, whom I've known since she was just a wee lass in Philadelphia in the United States. I knew her family and her two sisters, her mom, her dad. We got a lot of history together. I think you're going to love Rachel's perspectives on all kinds of things. So stay tuned. And thanks for joining us for these 18 minutes. Every week, we love bringing you special guests and special information. Thanks.
Don't know much about history. Don't know much biology. Don't know much about a science book. Don't know much about the French I took. But I do know that I love you. And I know that if you love me too, what a wonderful world this would be.
On this date in history, the 10th of December in 2007, Argentina's famous politician Cristina Fernández de Kirchner was sworn into office as Argentina's first female elected president. She succeeded her husband, Nestor Kirchner. In 1948, the General Assembly of the United Nations adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In 1815, English mathematician Ada Lovelace, who was called the first computer programmer, was born, and that's the historical marker of the week.
But I do know that I love you, and I know that if you love me too, what a wonderful world this would be.
Rachel Kushner, I've known you for decades and used to love visiting your family when you were just a kid and you lived in Philadelphia. Yeah, you've moved a bit. What's your favorite thing about December in Louisville, Kentucky?
Well, my favorite thing about Louisville, Kentucky in December is when we first moved here about 5 years ago, we went to this, there's a lot of caves here in this part of the world. And some of them you can drive through and they have beautiful displays. And we went to like a sort of Christmas holiday themed, adventure. I don't know how else to describe it. And what I was blown away with is above the Christmas tree that was lit up, it said, Jesus is Lord, or Jesus is the reason for the season, or something like that. And my husband and I were in shock. We're not used to like seeing Jesus's name in lights on a Christmas display. It was beautiful.
Well, what's the big deal about cheese and beef on a hoagie bun, and you're calling it a Philadelphia cheesesteak? Did no one else ever put those ingredients together in any other city?
Yeah, but it's not, when you go to order, Bob, it's not, they don't ask you if you want cheese. They say, with or without whiz? With or without whiz? You want whiz? It's cheese whiz. It's not cheese. It's whatever
embarrassment.
Cheese whiz is. But now you can get provolone and different kinds of cheeses. It is an odd combination, but it does work. They're delicious.
It's not
With
kosher, but it's okay.
it's not kosher, but it's delicious.
Speaking of kosher, you're a Jewish woman, you live in the United States.
Yeah.
You've been looking at things, especially since the 7th of October. Do you have any concerns about increased anti-Semitism, both globally and there in the United States?
It's very concerning. I mean, honestly, Bob, it makes me think back to my grandparents because they left Europe they were in Vienna, Austria in 1937 when my father was born in Vienna. And they escaped in 1939. But Mutti, we call my grandmother Mutti because my dad's first language was German, and Mutti is Hebrew or not Hebrew, is German for mother. So he called her Mutti. So anyway, we all the grandkids call her Mutti. So Mutti and Grandpa knew that they had to get out. I mean, they had to get out. And so she did whatever she needed to do. There's of course a lot of details to that story, but they had the big red J stamped on their passport indicating that they were Jewish. And sometimes I find myself wondering, like, are we headed are we headed back there? I don't know. I mean, as a Jewish woman in the United States, I am deeply concerned about this rise of anti-Semitism, and it's globally. It's not just here in the United States. I recently was flying on an airplane, and I hesitated putting on my Star of David necklace, and I've never ever felt that way. And I thought, I don't know if I want to wear this.
Did you? Did you end up wearing it?
I did, but I had something that sort of covered it if I felt I needed to. And I'm thinking to myself, as I'm going through these crazy motions, why do I feel like that? I'm 55 years old, never felt that in my whole life. I thought that age was behind us. I kind of feel like what happened to the we'll never forget?
People have forgotten.
People
That's
have
so true.
forgotten.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, the sun sets earlier every day until the solstice, which is just soon, 21st December.
Yeah.
But the weatherman predicts colder temperatures for the U.S. through February. How do you
Oh,
prepare yourself and your family for the onset of more winter?
I'm staying inside. I'm staying inside and making a fire and putting on my cozy slippers and my big giant robe. And I have been known to wear like a winter hat around the house when I'm cold.
A stocking cap?
Yes, exactly.
We did last talk when we were on your podcast, and you started podcasting a couple of years ago, and your show is called Links to Messiah, which I think is clever. Is that a play on words?
What a beautifully leading question, Bob Mendelsohn. Yes, it's a total play on words because, as you know, my maiden name is Links. And so, links to Messiah when starting a business/ministry just felt right.
Uh, your father, I knew your father before I knew you. And just a beautiful mom, your mom and dad both. Tell me your favorite thing about your father or about your mother or both.
Well, something that I admired, and my sisters and I have talked about this, we really admire my parents so much in many, many ways. But one really important thing that they did, they both grew up in very difficult childhoods. Like, for example, my mom grew up with an alcoholic father. My dad, they came when he was just a baby, and he was an only child, and both of his parents were working, and they were very poor. And there was a lot of, dysfunction in both families of them growing up. And they really covenanted together to make sure that they were going to stop that pattern and create a healthy environment for raising a family. So my sisters and I are so, so grateful for that. My mom, Sandy, she had really the gift of discernment, and she just had a lot of common sense, which, as you and I both know, our world seems to be lacking a lot of common sense. It doesn't seem very common anymore, right? And she was like, we always joked that she was the glue that held our family together. Um, and with my dad, I just, he was such an encourager. I mean, there's so many things I could say about both of them, but my dad was such an encourager. My sister Debbie and I were just talking yesterday, I think, about that we can still hear his words of encouragement in our head. Like I hear him cheering us on. When I'm having moments of discouragement, I can hear him saying, like, Rachel, no, you could do this. You got to do this. This is amazing what you're doing. Oh, the world's gonna love, I can just hear his voice always cheering us on. And of course, he had a deep love for scripture and for the Bible, and he studied and was very passionate about sharing Jesus with the world. Everywhere we went, he was talking to people about Jesus, and we loved it, but sometimes it was very annoying. Like, come on, we already got the gas for the car. Can we please get back in the car and continue our trip?
uh, I, I like your podcast, Links to Messiah. Is that how people reach you?
Yeah, everything I do is links to Messiah. If it's the podcast, I have a blog, I have a website, freebies, boxes that those activity boxes for the different Jewish holidays. Um,
So people
Everything,
just Google Links to Messiah and they'll find you?
definitely.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you've lived in the US all your life. What's the number one issue you have about changes in the United States of late?
I don't know I don't know. How would you answer that, Bob?
People have to
Mm,
know how to speak peaceably. Um,
mm,
you look at the brothers of Joseph back in Egypt, and they couldn't speak peaceably to him. And I think that defines this era. And I
yeah,
long for that, where people can argue lovingly instead of argue hostilely. And we
uh,
just don't, I think it's missing globally. Just this morning, as we're recording this on a Friday, it'll be out on Tuesday, this episode. So just a few days ago, there it was, a shouting match in Parliament. And it could have been in Ireland, it could have been in the US, it could have been in Australia, it doesn't matter. Every parliament seems to have this this shouting match of hostility that we don't want our children to see. No, that's not how you deal with people with whom you disagree. But it's on our televisions almost every day. And I think that that disregard of the other
mm.
is the most concerning to me.
So can I ask you a question about that? Because I absolutely agree that this is a huge problem that we can't have like a conversation about it. That it's like, well, if you are on this side, then here are all the things that you believe, and people are putting things on me that maybe I don't actually believe, and vice versa, going both ways. Well, how did that start? Because like when I was a kid, that didn't happen. Like we would have conversations around the dinner table that could get heated, but they weren't like filled with anger and rage, and I'm going to distance myself from you, and we're not doing holidays together anymore because we believe differently. Like, I don't know where this came from. Is this a result of social media?
Oh no. No, that just is an aggravator of it, but I don't think that's the genesis of it. The genesis is Cain not being able to hang out with Abel, and it's just been under the surface for so long. I think social media allows it to come up into the surface and up above. But no, that's not it's just an aggravator of it. The problem is sin. The problem is man wants
Yeah.
what man wants, and he's going to do whatever he wants to get it. The Apostle James said, "Where do wars come from? You lust and you don't have, and so you want it." And I think that's ever the issue. It's sin, And there's one answer to that, and it's not civility. The answer to that is not handshakes or treaties that we sign in the Middle East. The answer to that is redemption and forgiveness of sins. And we'll get to that in another episode. Hey, Rachel, what a
That's
joy
a
to
good
talk
point.
to you. What a joy. Thank you for your time today. I wish you, Gordon, all the mishpacha, great. I love your sisters. It's just been a
Yeah.
joy to know your family for so many decades. And I
Decades.
wish you a happy Hanukkah, a happy Merry Messiahmas, all the things that want to give you pleasure. And I can just see you there by the hearth fire
Yeah.
in
Oh,
Louisville
yeah.
and wrapped up in your robe and saying, I'm going to hunker down. This is Hibernation by Kushner.
Yes.
This is great.
Yep.
No, I wish you a successful end of year and a joyful beginning of what's the next year, 2025.
5. It seems impossible.
It does. Thanks again for your time. All the best.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate you.
I invite you to write me just now, would you? Right where you're getting the podcast on Spotify or Apple or wherever you're listening, on iHeartRadio, we're on all of them. Write to me, right there. Or make a comment on Facebook or on email. Heard of that? BobMendo@AOL.com. Tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what subjects you'd like to hear about. Guests you'd like me to interview for this new season, season 7. As we launch into that at the end of 2024, there's so much I want to let you, the listeners, hear. I want you to ponder. I want you to process. And together, I think it's going to be a good new season of the podcast. By the way, this is Mendelssohn's Wedding March. In case you don't recognize it, I like using the music of Felix or Fanny Mendelssohn for each of our seasons. If you want to write to Rachel Kushner, just Google Links to Messiah. She'll be delighted to hear from you, I think, and you can get in on her podcasts or blogs or whatnot. Every week on the podcast, we read from the #1 bestseller of all times, the Bible, and today's no different. From the Apostle James, I mentioned it earlier. What is the source of quarrels and conflicts among you? Is not the source your pleasures that wage war in your members? You lust and you don't have, so you commit murder. You're envious and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. When things seem bleak or uncertain, look up to God. He's in his heaven, and Bob's your uncle.